All right. Good morning, everybody. Thank you all for showing up this morning to officially welcome back Kelly Kroskoff as president of
Nobody anticipated this. The quiet part was finally said aloud by the Indiana Fever president, who was sat at the top of the entire organization. Her remarks raised eyebrows and stirred up the entire basketball music community. For the first time, the realities of that franchise, music, politics, pressure, locker room dynamics, and the struggle between creating a champion and a brand were exposed. Music, everything you believe to be true about Caitlin Clark's circumstances in Indiana is altered once you learn the full story. Now, let's go back to the beginning of the story. Indiana was one of the least well-known teams in professional basketball prior to Caitlin Clark ever donning a Hoosier uniform. 6 victories in 2021, 5 in 2022, and 13 in 2023 are being discussed. They were a joke for almost 10 years. No spotlight, no alcohol, and no fans. There wouldn't be any cameras. The seats weren't packed. Music, whatever the fever had been, the WNBA scene had entirely transformed. Music, that was the truth. A once proud franchise was neglected. But despite their best efforts, nobody in that front office could have anticipated what transpired. When the first overall pick in the 2024 WNBA draft entered the room, everything changed. Caitlin Clark not only lowered the temperature, but also altered the league as a whole. Everywhere she performed, the crowds were completely sold out. To be honest, music had never been seen in women's basketball since music, but there were record-breaking TV ratings, jerseys flying off the racks, and a media frenzy. The company had to make a decision in the midst of that eruption. Would they attempt to steer the wave in a different direction or ride it? The Fever needed someone at the top who realized exactly what they had, a once-in-a-generation talent who is single-handedly altering what was possible for women's sports, and the front office made a decision that astonished many people. At that point, the whole story becomes intriguing. Kelly Kroskoff was appointed as their new president of business operations and basketball. It made sense on paper. Kroskoff had the Fever in the past, was a member of the team that won the 2012 championship, and had first-hand knowledge of the group. The squad introduced her with all the excitement that was expected. However, something in the language of her first news conference brought up issues that many chose to ignore at the moment, but which would subsequently come back to destroy the entire company months later. No one noticed the warning signs until it was too late, since they were concealed in plain sight. At this time, everything fell apart. July of 2025. Caitlin Clark's injury-related absence is causing problems for the Fever. Due to a groin problem that has been plaguing her for weeks, Clark has only participated in 11 games this season. Fans are irritated. The team is on the verge of making it to the postseason. There is increasing pressure. On the same day that the video from Kroskoff's first press conference inexplicably resurfaces on social media, the internet unearths a speech from October 2024 that most people had completely missed. This is about the Indiana Fever, Kroskoff declared while looking directly into the cameras during the news conference. Yes, Aaliyah Boston and Caitlin Clark are our main players, and we plan to keep improving music. However, I want this team to become a national leader and a long-lasting brand like Apple. 5 words like an apple. Since few individuals heard that vision in that sentence, that was all that was required. In just a few hours, the video went viral, and its fan base quickly expanded. It served as a caution. At the Fever front office, this kind of response was unheard of. Fans were not just angry, but also well-organized, music loud, and hard to ignore when they were furious. Because of what Apple actually accomplished, the comparison to Apple struck a different chord. One visionary, Steve Jobs, was the foundation of their entire identity, and when he left, the company all but fell apart. Because of this, Clark supporters perceived the Fever president's use of that same analogy as revealing, as though they already viewed Clark as an element rather than the primary emphasis. A fan responded to enduring brands that align with their values on social media. Steve Jobs, the company's star and visionary, is credited with making Apple a global icon. Another fan didn't hold back either. When Clark eventually decides she's had enough of the front office dumpster fire, The Fever will acknowledge that they wasted the greatest chance in women's sports history, they stated music. The answers, comment sections, and message boards all express the same basic sentiment. You continue to focus on her and don't minimize the most significant player this team has ever had. There was more to the criticism than just noise. A few hours after the video went viral, CrossGolf's whole account disappeared. A few days prior, there had simply been a social media presence. Someone in that organization made the decision, and they were aware of how dire things were becoming. There was quiet in place of a message or an explanation. The players on the court, the ones who actually suit up next to Caitlin Clark every night, were telling an entirely different and far more truthful story, while the front staff was being demonized online. This is where things become even more convoluted. When Lexi Hull, one of Clark's closest friends, applied for a beauty magazine story, she had nothing. Although virtually no one in a Fever suit had previously been prepared to reveal, Hull said that everyone in the league already knew. Because of the media attention and the people who have supported us music since Caitlin arrived, I believe there is some envy over the Fever. She went one step further and disclosed that teams from all over the league had been publicly discussing things like, "We can't let the Fever win in their own locker rooms." A disturbing reality that had been developing for 2 seasons was revealed by Hull's remarks. These days, the Fever do more than simply play hoops. Every time they play, opposing teams target them because of a single member of their team rather than the team's performance as a whole. Sophie Cunningham went one step farther. The player who established herself as Clark's enforcer on the floor and made it obvious early on that taking cheap shots at her teammate would have consequences had already come forward and confirmed what the entire league had been wondering about. Before entering Indiana, Aaliyah Cunningham said she heard music it. There were explicit conversations about Clark in the locker room, she claimed while she was still in Phoenix. That rivals weren't merely aiming for victory. They were attempting to make their point. Music. The story of Clark being physically targeted and receiving an unending welcome to the W moment has been chronicled throughout the season. Even objective onlookers were shocked by the intensity of the hard play directed at Clark by the time her groin injury ended her season after just 13 games, and many were seriously questioning whether the referees had adequately protected her. A growing percentage of those who were listening carefully said that the answer was no. However, the inside story of what it's truly like to be Caitlin Clark's coworker was beginning to emerge as all of this was happening in the public eye. Thus, music is only the start. It was likewise not what the critics had anticipated. The most common story advanced by Caitlin Clark's detractors was that she caused issues in the restroom. She was disliked by the players, who believed that no team could survive the divisions caused by the attention and celebrity. In a September 2024 podcast, Hall of Famer Cheryl Swoops claimed that important Fever players were subtly expressing their disinterest in attending and that the circumstances surrounding Clark were too much for them to handle. It spread quickly. The music was playing all over the place, or it became part of the background discussion as the Fever began its second season together. Unless, of course, Diana Taurasi and Stewie, music, Bird invited Clark to come as a guest on another March Madness broadcast. She faced it head-on. She wasn't upset. She didn't act defensively. She was remarkably composed about it. In essence, you grow accustomed to others believing they know what goes on behind closed doors when, in fact, they don't. Music. She continued to receive encouragement from her co-workers in that locker room. During the 2025 playoffs, Clark's teammates flooded the floor after she recovered from her injuries. They ended her interview after the game. They unexpectedly appeared for her. Music. There was real joy in the locker room following the Fever's Commissioner's Cup victory. The players' bonding, laughter, and genuine happiness for one another didn't read like a performance. The media hasn't yet combined this information. Whether or not Caitlin Clark's teammates liked her was never the main focus of the Fever story. It concerned whether the front office, which was in charge of them all, was prepared to surround her with the required parts and give the project their whole focus. Aaliyah's connections at the judicial level were genuine, which explains the disparity. Music. Boston was good friends with Clark. Lexi Hull was wary. Before they had even played a game together, Sophie Cunningham and other new players were swooning over Clark. The rookie who made the final roster, Michaela Timpson, treated Clark with genuine respect in a way that is difficult to duplicate. After the expansion draft, Clark wrote messages on Instagram for two of her teammates, "Cub, I love you," for Christy Wallace, and "My Aussie for life," for Chloe Bibby Wade. The affection music was real. These were real relationships, but contacts are not enough to win trophies. And that was the tension at the center of it all. Not only the Apple Sound clip, but the rest of Kelly Krauskopf's words from the October 2024 press conference highlighted something that many people missed in their rush music to vent their anger. When Krauskopf voiced her wish for the Fever to be a long-lasting brand, she was talking about the long game. Caitlin Clark was 10 years old when Indiana won its only title in 2012, she recalled. Music, adding that sometimes it takes a generation to reach the next level. Maybe the group had been working for someone else all along, setting the seeds for a 10-year-old someplace who would be inspired by what the Fever was doing at the time. Whether you interpret that as vision or deception depends on how you perceive the front office's actual priorities. But this is undeniable. Fans that attended the Fever commencing in 2024 did not show up because of a brand. They came because of a player. They drove for hours at a time. The WNBA had never seen payments like the ones they made. The number of spectators had never been forecasted by the league. Additionally, ticket sales decreased when Clark's injuries prevented him from performing in ways that could be quantified, recorded, and publicly acknowledged. TV viewership of music decreased. There was no denying the hard, unpleasant reality of what Clark meant by it. Franchise. However, the organization's top-level message repeatedly mentioned the team, the institution, and the brand, as though the individual garnering all of that attention was somehow distinct from it. Krauskopf made a particularly notable statement during that press conference. "You would want to play with Caitlin Clark if you're a smart basketball player and you see how she plays," she added. And even she probably didn't realize at the time how true that turned out to be. The Fever's recruiting success has subtly developed into one of the most compelling stories in the WNBA. In order to travel to Indiana, players had to accept wage reductions. The chance to play alongside Clark was the deciding factor for veterans. Clark's fan base wasn't limited to crowded stadiums. Players wanted to be a part of something greater than a typical WNBA season because of the atmosphere it was fostering. In spite of this, the Fever had grown to be one of the league's most well-liked locations. Not because of a brand strategy, but rather because of a basketball player who made everyone around her better and filled buildings wherever she went. Let's go on to 2026 and the Fever's upcoming musical pursuits. In the WNBA expansion draft, the team lost two players. Christy Wallace is going to Toronto, and Chloe Bibby White is going to Portland. Clark herself had to put up with a season that was meant to be her breakthrough second year, but instead it was a nightmare of injuries that kept her to only 13 games in the regular season. She was chosen for the All-Star game despite averaging 16.5 points, 8.5 assists, and 5 rebounds per game. Despite this, she remained